takes you to the moment in time that can give you what your heart wants most.
I'm Chloe Charming. I've always wondered what it's like over there.
Wonderland.
Sorry, I never had to, Oh! Ew!
This is Descendants 4, The Rise of Red. The movie that took us to Wonderland and still somehow made it feel small. I don't know about you guys, I was kind of ready for a magical political drama with a lot of hard stakes and visuals that actually made it feel like it was in a magical Disney world, or at least the aftermath of it, post magical Disney world. Instead, it really felt like it was a poorly thought through side quest. It included broken lore and really the most anticlimactic ending that came out of any of the Descendants movies. But do not fret, I am tearing it apart and rebuilding it from the ground up. Now, usually I don't try to do a complete overhaul of the plot. I like to at least stay to the core of the writer's ideas. But I think in this situation, it really calls for like a complete wipe of the story. And I like to think that my version actually makes you care more about Red as a character and what she does for the rest of the franchise if she's included in more stories. The Descendants franchise started off strong. The first movie was really strong. It was pretty decent, pretty good, at least for a Disney Channel movie. But the sequels, they don't really hit as hard, especially as they go on. And then Descendants 4 is pretty much the worst of the worst. They're all pretty much hit or miss. Wonderland was supposed to be the most unique, surreal setting in the series, but we didn't really explore it. We pretty much just went back to Oregon, which is really, it's not weird necessarily. It's just, like, for the first 3 movies, we were already in Oregon, and, The Rise of Red, I'm thinking Wonderland, we're about to explore what it is, at least in this universe. But no, we just stay in Oregon, and then we move to Beta Oregon. And Wonderland is pretty much just treated as, like, an afterthought. And then from there, the problems just pile on. Queen is supposed to be, like, this terrifying figure, and her intimidation is more tell, no show. She never does anything that actually proves why she's feared. Red's arc, completely flat. It really does nothing. She starts off rebellious and still ends as rebellious. Nothing really changes. And like halfway through the movie, or more than halfway through the movie, they tell us like something on how she really feels inside. But they really don't even build off that in her character arc. And there's like zero meaningful growth. Uma, who shouldn't have really been included, she gets maybe 10 minutes of screen time, and then she's just gone. Imagine making like a Pirates of the Caribbean spinoff, and then Jack Sparrow just shows up for like a couple minutes. I'm not saying China Anne McClain is as big as like Johnny Depp, but it's like, why include her if she's only going to be in there for a couple minutes? And don't even get me started on the lore. The lore is probably the worst part. Suddenly we go back in time, and then all the villains are all teenagers. They're all going to this school. They treat it like it's an actual, like, high school, I guess. I get it. Oregon is, like, a school. But the point is, at least what I got, is supposed to have the stories, the original stories. And then after all the original stories happen, the villains are banished. And then the descendants of the heroes are in this school, right? And then all the villains are just... It's just weird. All the villains are teenagers. And so what? They just decide to just banish the villains? They don't seem like villains. They just seem more like troubled kids, right? Just like the Descendants in the original movie. And it just doesn't make any sense. Hades is a literal god. He wasn't a teenager going to school 25 years prior. Then there's this thing with the Queen's backstory. She was this super nice, outgoing, bubbly girl. Until what? Someone pulled a prank on her one night, and then she became a ruthless, evil tyrant? That doesn't track. That doesn't track for me, dude. That's like saying Darth Vader became the part of the Sith because someone pissed in his Cheerios. No, that's stupid. So the main plot of the movie, Red teams up with Chloe, who is the daughter of Prince Charming and Cinderella, and they accidentally time travel using the Mad Hatter's pocket watch. And the way the watch works, it pretty much takes you back to the moment where it can give you what your heart wants the most. It sounds deep, but really in execution, it just pretty much like generic plot magic. So they go back in time to stop the moment that supposedly turned the queen evil, which they find out was the prank. And they kind of make Chloe out to be like the prime and proper and ditzy version of Red. You know, they're supposed to like, or like the contrast of Red, which I didn't really see the purpose in that either. You know, the odd couple setup is like, it's funny at times and it's heartfelt at times, but there's no real build up. You know, it's the rise of Red. Just focus on Red. Why is Chloe even there? Why is she considered like they don't even help each other really with their like I mean they kind of do, I guess, but it's not really real. It's just a whole jumbled mess, the movie. And then again, back in the present, the queen is pretty much terrified, or no, everybody isn't terrified of the queen, but again, she doesn't do anything to make that really believable. Now, to be fair, sometimes it's enough for characters to be known or to be felt more by the audience and by what others say about them. But before Auradon, she doesn't really display any type of magic, and she can't even get her own daughter to listen to her. So this evil, menacing presence she's supposed to have it's not really felt. Except, I guess, felt by the soldiers, I guess, but they're soldiers. They're supposed to listen to the queen. And you don't really know anything on how she's feared unless you know other Wonderland-related stories. And then somehow she just takes over Auradon within, like, what, an hour? With just a few soldiers and spears that she just magically stored in her playing cards. Like, does Auradon not have any guards, magical defenses, not even, like, I don't know, a retired magical person to, like, help fighting? Like, somebody has magic. Someone has magic to be able to fight against the Queen of Hearts. That just doesn't make any sense. I was very irritated when I saw that. So going back to Red and Chloe, they meet the Queen of Hearts back when she was nice. They stop the prank from happening, which erases her villainy, which is already, a little bit weird. I mean, I might be able to get past it if the plot was better, but they just, it rewrites the continuity. If she was never evil in the first place, they would have never gone back in time. Like, Red wouldn't even be necessarily invited to Auradon, right? Like, they know Wonderland isn't a bad place, so why would they invite Red to Auradon? Like, out of, for troubled kids. He wouldn't be a troubled kid at that point. So yeah, the rise of Red is just a mess, like wibbly wobbly crap, but we can fix it. Like, the biggest issue is trying to juggle like Auradon, the time travel, and Wonderland, and Red's personality, and then Chloe all into one bunch. And it ends up doing nothing for any of them. My solution, you scrap Auradon, you scrap the time travel, you just focus, you even scrap Chloe from the movie. You just focus on Red, her journey, and then that journey within Wonderland. That way the movie has a proper focal point, and we're not trying to just make another character just to have another character in there and have some type of lore dump. Now, I want to make it clear, I'm not a formal writer. I'm not bound by deadlines or budgets, and I don't have to answer any higher ups, and I have the benefit of hindsight. So don't act like I'm just completely just crapping on the writers and the animators and, everyone who worked on the movie. I'm just a guy giving his own ideas and his own opinions. So I do think it is a good idea to still open up with Uma narrating. She talks about Wonderland as a place where reality and madness blur, and it's a land of beauty, danger, and strange rules. I think that's fine. Just don't have her show up on screen. She can do a voiceover or something. That's fine. And then boom, we're in Wonderland. We cut to a musical number where we learn about Red, introducing us to Red. She vandalizes the castle grounds, and we also find out she's spoiled, clever, and hot-tempered. She enjoys the privileges of royalty, but doesn't respect the responsibilities. After the musical number, she gets a citizen and encourages them to do some type of dangerous stunt that's part of the vandalization of the castle, and for her own amusement. But her friend Maddox Hatter stops her. They both return to the castle, and after some criticism and playful banter, the queen calls for Red. And then the queen scolds her for being immature and naive. Red says she has no interest in ruling. Ruling is boring for her, but she just enjoys the freedom. The queen takes her to town square to punish the guards, or one guard, I should say, for not being able to capture the vandal. Red nervously blurts out, "Off with his head." But she changes her mind because she's not as ruthless as her mother is. The queen sees it as weakness. They return to the castle together, and the queen admits that she knows that Red is the vandal. She just wanted to test her in her resolve, but she still just accuses her of being too weak to hold any type of real power. In frustration, the queen sends her on a fool's errand to go find the Heart of Wonderland, a legendary artifact that holds the realm's magic. She knows Red isn't going to be able to find it, but she's hoping it's going to harden her and break her spirit and make her prove her own worth for her mother. Red sets out in a car because for some reason there's a whole car in Wonderland with Maddox Hatter and two characters that I've added to the story, Tweedledug and Tweedledon, I'm going to call them. And as they're traveling, they experience the crazy land around them, why Wonderland is just so illogical and mad and crazy and weird, and up is down, left is right, and they just have a hard time navigating through everything. Eventually, early on in their journey, they get ambushed, stripped of all their supplies, even the car, and they're just left alone deep in the forest of Wonderland. They happen to meet some odd citizens who take them in, feed them, and help them a little bit on their journey. And this becomes the first time where Red actually gets humbled. She even encounters other citizens that happen to want to help her, and that just happen to be nice. Not everyone is crazy or mean or deceitful in Wonderland. As they're traveling more, they encounter the Cheshire Cat. And the Cheshire Cat, being this weird, creepy thing, gives them a riddle. The Heart of Wonderland you seek is not where you think, but where you've yet to look. Just some riddle that relates to the theme of the story and Red's development. Along the way, they face 3 trials, each important to Red's development as a character and as a leader. I was kind of stumped on the exact trials, but as long as the idea is there, I think it's fine. Like, one was a cunning over brute force, where basically she has to outsmart a rival in a puzzle where lying causes the ground to break and she could fall through. And then empathy over rage, saving someone she hates rather than letting them fall to danger. And then sacrifice for the greater good, where she has to give up something she loves to save someone or save the kingdom. It doesn't have to be exactly those, but as long as they push her forward as a leader, that would be fine. Now, after all that, Red does become a little irritated, and she finds a shortcut, and she wants to take that shortcut, but it is a reckless decision because her and her friends can see it is a more dangerous path. Her friends argue with her, say she should probably do this like the right way, as the Cheshire Cat kind of hinted to, but Red, she's not hearing it, and she uses her power as a princess to try and demand them to come with her. But they don't like it, and they abandon her. She presses on alone, and she's walking, and she eventually reaches a field of mist. It's creepy, it's eerie, and then she thinks she hears things, and then all of a sudden she finds a doppelganger. It's like a magical embodiment of all her flaws and insecurities. And all this doppelganger is doing is just pouring into her and then bashing her with everything she's done wrong and everything that's actually wrong with her. She even mentions how her own friends left her and how her own mother doesn't really want her. So for the first time in her life, Red admits all of her selfishness, all of her flaws, and she cries and apologizes for her behavior and what she did with her friends and with the citizens. And after that, the mist clears and the Heart of Wonderland is revealed to her. Red looks up, sees the heart, takes the heart, and feels total relief. But the shrine the heart was on collapses, and she tries to run, but she's falling through the ground. Her friends show back up right in time to save her. They help her up, and as they're running for their safety, Red apologizes, they forgive her, and once they reach safety, they wonder how long it's going to take to get back to Wonderland without any supplies. But they use the heart's magic and get back to the castle in an instant. Now Red is returned. She confronts the queen, shows her that she actually found the Heart of Wonderland, and the queen is absolutely surprised. and she asks Red to hand it over to her. But before she does, Red tells her what she learned on her journey, and that Wonderland doesn't have to be ruled with just fear alone. And the queen gets upset and thinks Red is still weak and hasn't learned a thing, and is still this naive teenager. So she tries to seize the heart herself and attacks Red. Red defends herself, and with the power of the heart of Wonderland, she defeats her mother with total control of her powers, proving that she can wield power without letting it consume her. Now, the queen is obviously surprised and totally overwhelmed, so she's forced to yield to her daughter. Then she's restrained and put in a cage of some sort. I don't know, a magical bubble. Obviously, the relationship is still going to be rocky as time goes on. It's still like jealousy and pride and a lot of tension. Red asks the people what they want to happen, and Red is declared the new queen of Wonderland. Red speaks to all of Wonderland and says she wants to rule with respect and not intimidation. And she promises that Wonderland is going to be a place where madness and order can coexist. And then, we get a dance number and, some wrap-ups. And then, we get a cliffhanger or a hint at that story isn't over and that there's going to be another Descendants movie. And that's about it. That's my rewrite. I like to think it covers and fixes a lot of the core problems of the original movie. There's really no order to the movie. It doesn't really necessarily focus entirely on Red. It gives her a proper character arc and actually has us explore Wonderland, at least in that universe. Are there a few tweaks, probably here and there? Maybe I would do something more with the Queen, and I really want to add a few more like Wonderland characters to it. But these are just my ideas that I had. I do think it's generally good for the plot and makes you feel like the emotional climax actually matters. Hopefully the next Descendants movie isn't going to be nearly as bad as this one was. I'm going to watch it naturally because, I like torturing myself. But if you could change anything about The Rise of Red, what ideas do you have? And were my ideas good? Were they bad? What would you change? Did something I say not make any sense? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I read all of them, and I like to think someone's going to inspire future rewrites. And if there's enough comments, I plan to make a video involving those comments and kind of tweaking my story, maybe expanding upon those ideas that other people have. And if you like this, check out my Lilo and Stitch live action rewrite. All right, deuce.